material kin. Good morning, Georgie.
Good morning, Mike. Beautiful day, isn't it?
Sure is. Near perfect. Clear skies, light winds, and the forecast high is 76 degrees. If he's up for it, I'll be taking the captain for a drive later.
Wonderful, Mike. I'm sure he will enjoy that. He's waiting for you at the usual place.
Good. We'll let you know when we leave. I'll have him home before dinner.
Fine. I hope you both have a great day.
Top of the morning, Captain. Looks like a decent day for an airport visit, doesn't it?
Let's see what it looks like in a couple of hours.
Suits me, Captain. Did you get through the handbook?
More or less. Did you?
I skimmed through it for high points. Hopefully my legal fast-reading experience will carry me through today.
Well, we'll see. It's good to have confidence. Meanwhile, Mike, let's press on with this interview. Since you seem to want my entire biography, I'm going to ask a favor. For the benefit of my decedents who may one day be interested in family history and actually read your book, I ask to take this juncture to briefly tell what I know of my mother's immediate family. You can delete it later if it doesn't fit. Shall I proceed?
Lead the way, Captain.
We drove to Portland before sailing to Germany to visit Mother Ada's family. Her mother Grace and her husband Dan, plus Ada's 6 siblings, 1 older brother and 5 younger sisters and their families. As fate would have it, this was to be their final gathering of Grace's 7 children, who were all born in McGalloway Plantation, Maine, where the only industry was the lumber company my grandfather worked for. Grandmother Grace Bennett married Earl Hoyt at age 16 and bore him 7 children. Mother Ada, the second, was born April 28, 1911. 15 years later, Father Hoyt died on the operating table from an allergic reaction to ether during an appendectomy. Life in Maine was brutal in those days, especially during the harsh winters. Survival depended almost entirely on self-sufficiency. Grace did not fare well as a young widow and destitute mother of 7, to the point where the farm was sold and her children were boarded out to foster homes, except for older brother Merton and Ada, who were old enough to be on their own. Merton married a local girl, and the lumber company sent Ada off to a Boston girls' trade school to be trained as a seamstress. By the time I came along, Grandmother Grace had recovered and worked at the B&M Bean Factory, which greatly redeemed Portland's Back Bay sewage stench when the tide was out. The delicious odor of those 8-hour baking beans pervaded the entire city. Grace had an endearingly husky voice and laugh. She resembled the great actress Ethel Barrymore and had similar commanding presence. She was warm, soft, and loving, yet highly intelligent and strong. She truly was the queen of the family. I remember her with great reverence and affection. As her oldest grandson, I was her favorite. Late in life, Grace married Dan Benwell, a fellow B&M employee who had been an alcoholic to the point of having DTs. Grace refused his proposal unless he swore off. True to his word, Dan never drank again, and I have never known 2 people more vigorously in love and happy until they passed away in the 50s. Everyone loved both of them. Lesson learned, it's never too late. Mother's brother and best childhood friend, Merton, was an oddball, as are most maniacs. Early on, he married a McGalloway farm girl. They had 1 daughter, but were soon divorced. During World War II, Merton joined the Navy as a CB, as the construction battalion was known. He was reported missing when his ship was sunk in the Pacific, but thankfully turned up. After the war, he became a career fireman in Portland and once made front-page news for rescuing a baby from a burning building. Merton then married Tina, an attentive schoolteacher who was unjustifiably disliked by the family for her education, class, reserved ways, and pinched facial expression. They had one son, Leroy, who was still in jail last I heard. When Merton retired as a fireman, they moved to Naples, Florida, where he had an outboard motor repair shop until he passed from cancer in the 60s. Mother's sisters impressed me as exceptionally bright and independent women, each in their own way, yet very different from my mother, who was labeled with an undeserved rich bitch tag. It tells you something about Ada's sisters, that they could consider an Army sergeant's wife a rich bitch, doesn't it? I could spend hours telling you just the little I knew about Ada's sisters. Briefly, though, they were very colorful, earthy, salty, intelligent, and strong-willed women, much like their mother Grace, only without her grace. Frances had 7 children, one stillborn, by her husband Tommy, a crude truck driver who stayed home only long enough to father Frances's next baby. They had a very stormy relationship, but an underlying everlasting bond. I admired both of them. Tommy and father got along well, though they had little in common. In my teens, I was proud to be allowed to play poker and go fishing with them at night off the piers in Portland Harbor, while they discussed women, comparing their relative traits to makes of automobiles. Cadillacs being tops, of course. It was a nice rite of passage for me. Tommy passed away in the 60s. Frances lived to a ripe old age and passed in the 90s, cared for by a devoted son who lived with her. Wilma was pale, thin, and frail. She also married a truck driver named Guppy, who was as pale and thin as she was, so of course they had 3 pale, thin children. Wilma later got the family's attention when she abandoned her husband and children to run off with a man to Florida. Marjorie was the sister most like her mother, and so was everyone's favorite. Stout, jovial, and bright, Marjorie, like Grace, was a commanding presence. Marjorie was married once, just long enough to get pregnant with her son Wayne before her Army husband shipped out to die on Normandy Beach during the D-Day landings. In the 50s, Marjorie had an unhappy affair which resulted in the birth of her daughter. She worked mostly in hospitals as a nurse's aide and was living in a trailer when she died of heart failure in the 70s. Pearl was the saltiest, toughest, most fiery and temperamental of the sisters. She and Jean, the youngest sister, were very close, as were Pearl and Marjorie, who played guitar and sang country western music together. Pearl first married an abusive bartender and had her only child, Kenneth. Pearl's second husband was career Army. Her third husband, John, was a retired postal worker. They moved to Tallahassee in the 80s to be near her son, Kenneth, when John had a severely disabling stroke and passed away in the early 90s, a week before my father. Pearl passed away in a nursing home with Alzheimer's disease. Jean was the youngest, prettiest, and most glamorous of the sisters. She married the brother of Pearl's first husband, who was also an abusive bartender, and had a baby girl. When Jean divorced, she asked my parents to take her daughter in. My father agreed, but only on the condition of adoption, his way of getting out of it, since he knew it would be unacceptable to Jean. We never knew for sure, but believed that the daughter was raised by her ex's parents in Erie, Pennsylvania. In 1949, Jean was working at a Boston nightclub as a cocktail waitress, cigarette girl, and photographer. With her during our 1949 visit was the owner of the club, an obvious mafia-type figure. I always had a sort of crush on Jean, though I rarely saw or spoke to her. Actually, it would be more accurate to say that I felt a unique spiritual connection with Jean, a recognition of her as someone I had perhaps known before. Less than a year later, Jean was found dead in her apartment with the unlit stove gas on. The police ruled it a suicide, but the family believed it was a homicide. 20 years later, Jean would reveal herself in my life in a very dramatic way. That Portland visit before sailing to Germany was important to me because I was old enough to be included as more than a child to be seen and not heard. We all visited the old family homestead in McGalloway, where the well-preserved farmhouse still stood. Several great photos exist of that trip, 2 taken at a dam. One was of the entire gang face on, the other was of everyone's backsides as they leaned on the dam railing. Father titled that photo, "The American Can Company." One Saturday afternoon, we have a great clam bake on the Back Bay beach with the tide out for clam digging. Fortunately, with the wind behind us. Lobsters, Italian sandwiches, now called subs, B&M beans, beer, and soft drinks complemented the menu. God knows how anyone survived eating those Back Bay clams. Soon, however, it was time to be off to New York City to board an Army transport ship for Germany. So that's it for Mother's folks in 1949.
Okay, Captain. I'm glad you told me about your mother's family. Perhaps you will do the same on your father's side as well.
Sure, Mike, we'll get to them too, but first, let's go to the airport.
Airport. Shall we bring your chair along, Captain?
No, Mike, we won't be walking much, but you can give me a push to the lobby.
Which way, Captain?
Left out the gate, stay on Route 4 across the Patuxent River Bridge into St. Mary's County, all the way to Leonardtown, about 20 miles.
How did you come to be in this area, Captain?
All 3 of my sailboats were home ported near here at Solomon's Island from 1972 to 88. Solomon's is technically an island, only because there's a short bridge over a narrow inlet between it and the mainland. Basically, it was a small fishing village until the yachtsmen discovered it as one of the best and favorite ports on the western shore.
Why Chesapeake Bay, Captain?
For me, the bay is a uniquely outstanding place for a yachtsman, including old salts like me, who long ago swallowed the anchor. I even bought a lot on the edge of Calvert Cliffs in the 70s at the Chesapeake Ranch Club, just a few miles from here, but sold it along with everything else we owned when Susanix and I moved aboard Wings.
Only 65 miles from D.C. and an easy drive down Route 4. Yet this part of southern Maryland seems quite remote, Captain.
That's a feature I like, though southern Maryland is much more developed and well-traveled than it was before this bridge was built in the 70s, very much against the wishes of the locals on this side. Actually, once outside DC's Beltway in any direction except toward Baltimore, you soon find yourself in beautiful countryside and pleasant residential areas. We'll be taking the next right to cross the bridge. This area was first settled by Captain John Smith in 1639. In fact, St. Mary's City, near where we are going, was the first capital of Maryland. Hard to believe now, there's little there except St. Mary's College, a few restored buildings, an Amish settlement, and a replica of one of Smith's vessels. The main event was the Patuxent River Naval Air Station, home of the Navy Test Pilot School and the Naval Air Test Center, where all Navy airplanes underwent test and evaluation. These days, of course, the airplanes tested are mostly UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. Today's test pilots are mostly ground pounders playing video games with radio-controlled drones.
Do you feel that your days in aviation were the best?
In some ways, yes. If flying is about higher and faster, as many fighter pilots believe, then there were no improvements to airplanes after us, except in electronics and weapons. The F-4 Phantom was as good as they got. For the true romance and adventure of flight, however, I've always envied the generation of aviators before me who flew in the early days, World War I, the 20s and 30s, and World War II, when it was less about technology and more about personal skills, when wars were fought for clear good against evil causes, and we knew who the enemy was. In some ways, yes, if flying is about higher and faster, as many fighter pilots believe, then there were no improvements to airplanes after us except in electronics and weapons. The F-4 Phantom was as good as they got. For the true romance and adventure of flight, however, I've always envied the generation of aviators before me who flew in the early days, World War I, the 20s and 30s, and World War II, when it was less about technology and more about personal skills, when wars were fought for clear good against evil causes, and we knew who the enemy was.
I see your point, Captain. For me, flying the Aranca Champion is like turning the aviation clock back to the 40s, when the Champs first flew. In fact, Phillips Champ is a restored Army World War II L-16 Liaison Warbird. As you know, it's as basic and simple as airplanes get. Only essential flight instruments and no electronics. There's not even a starter. We have to hand crank the prop to start the 85 horsepower Continental engine. There certainly is a special romance in flying that kind of an airplane, low over the countryside at 80 knots. Quite different than sitting in an airliner at 40,000 feet, just under the speed of sound.
Quite right, Mike. The guys who fly airliners shouldn't even log their flight time. All they do is sit there monitoring the electronics, which do the actual flying and navigation from takeoff to landing. It was the great barnstorming aviators like Lindbergh who flew the rickety wood and fabric planes powered by unreliable engines with which they pioneered airmail and passenger routes day and night in all weather without electronics or navigation aids. They appreciated the true romance of aviation in ways we can never know. Okay, here we are. Turn right at the St. Mary's County Regional Airport sign, a pretentious name for a small country airstrip with only a 4,000-foot runway, no control tower, and little traffic. But that's what I like about it, simplicity. Just park to the left of that first hangar. I'll wait here while you slide the 2 hangar doors all the way to the side. The lock combination is 25-25.
Okay, Captain, doors open. What a beautiful airplane.
Oh, yes, she is. Much more so with her wings spread. Like sailboats, form follows function with sailplanes in an aesthetically pleasing way found nowhere else, except in sailboats and nature. See that long-handled dolly on the tail wheel, Mike? Just pick it up by the handles and push the bird straight out of the hangar. Then swing the tail to the right to line her up on the taxiway. It'll take some muscle. Max takeoff weight is nearly 1,800 pounds. Leave the tail wheel dolly in place. Things can get exciting if the tail swings while you're spreading or folding the wings. Go ahead, I'll catch up. Good work, Mike. Spreading them is the easy part. Folding them is more critical. If you lose it coming down, a winglet could go right through the top of the wing if the cushions slip out of place.
I can sure see why. Lifting those wing panels is close to my strength limits, and the angles are awkward. But I suppose it gets easier with practice. It would help if I were in better shape and 20 years younger.
Yeah, tell me about it, kid. You sure got my sympathy.
Well, this isn't the easiest airplane to get into, is it, Captain? Kind of tight spaces, and the reclining seats tilted back even more by having the tail down, with the open canopy partly blocking, makes it quite a twist and turn effort. I have to say that you manage quite well.
Considering my decrepit age, you mean, Mike? Couldn't do it without help, though, and as you'll see, getting out is even harder, a Simango feature which most ladies are not willing to endure. Only 5 women have flown with me in this bird. My fearless mother at age 96, my 2 daughters, an old Navy friend, Claudia, and Karen, who, bless her heart, was always very supportive of my extravagant hobbies, but subscribed to the Cole Porter lyric, "Flying too high with some guy in the sky is my idea of nothing to do." Will I get a kick out of you? You ready, Mike? All set, Captain. Okay, follow me through lightly on the controls. Say Mary's traffic, motor, glider 62 Sierra X-ray, rolling on 29, westbound. Tail up around 40 knots and let her fly off. Brakes to stop wheel rotation, then gear up, please, Mike.
I see what you mean about the strength needed to get the gear up, Captain. But it's great that it's all manual, without electric or hydraulic systems involved.
Yes, battery power is at a premium since I have averaged engine off for 2/3 of the flight time. Even if the battery dies, however, it's possible to air start the engine by diving at 100 knots. Now we'll shift the prop to cruise pitch by throttling back to 3,800 revolutions per minute and pulling the prop lever part way. Okay, now we'll cruise climb at full throttle to 5,000 feet, generally on this heading across the Potomac River into Virginia. It's all yours, Mike. Maneuver as you wish. I won't let you break anything. As you see on that placard before you, though, no aerobatic Gs.
Okay, I have the airplane, Captain.
After reaching 5,000 feet, the captain shut down the engine and demonstrated thermal soaring before turning the stick back to Mike.
Wow, Captain, this is magic! I can't believe I'm climbing 800 feet a minute and looking at a feathered propeller. We've already gained over 1,000 feet. Amazing! No wonder you love this airplane. It does everything. It glides so well. There's almost no feeling of descending, even when there's no lift. With no prop or engine noise, it's like having your own personal jet.
You got it, Mike, and consider this with no lift or wind from where we are now at 6,000 feet with a 34-to-1 glide ratio and 160 feet per minute descent. If we had complete engine failure, we would have over 30 miles and 30 minutes to find a landing spot. We can easily make it home from here, as we'll see. On winter days with no lift, I climb out to 10,000 feet or so in less than 20 minutes, shut down, and glide for 40 minutes at 60 knots. If I'm in more of a hurry, this bird cruises under power at 110 knots for a 600-mile range, burning less than half the fuel consumption of other light planes, and do it on much less expensive auto fuel. By the way, Jamongo is the Portuguese word for falcon. They were built by Aeromot at the very southern tip of Brazil and flown for delivery to the USA, 5,000 miles across the Amazon to Daytona Beach. One was even flown around the world in the 90s.
Amazing, Captain. I'm surprised I've never heard of Chamongos before. It does everything so well. It seems like the perfect recreational flying machine.
You're right, Mike. Unfortunately, few folks have heard of them. Well, it's time to head back if we're going to make dinner time. There's just one seating, so we'll be out of luck if we're late. I hope you don't mind. I told Georgie you were joining me. It's Tuesday, prime rib night, which is always a highlight of my week at Heritage Pines. They really do it right. Okay with you?
I'll be honored. Thank you, Captain. Good heavens. I had no idea we have been flying nearly 2 hours.
Like they say, time flies when you're having fun, Mike. Just point us east and see if you can find home field. I'll take it for the approach and landing when we get there. Engine off unless there's a lot of traffic in the landing pattern.
Do you always land dead stick, Captain?
Yes, if possible. It's a little easier than engine on and more fun to show off a little for the benefit of the power plane guys and the old-timer porch pilots who hang around the field. The feature of gliders that makes them easy to land are the spoilers, which are very effective speed brakes used to control rate of descent and speed. So you can lean toward the high, fast side on approach and use the spoilers much as you would throttle, only in reverse. Of course, if necessary, it's a quick and simple matter to restart the engine.
Intrigued. Seems like all planes should have spoilers, Captain.
I agree, Mike. In fact, some Mooney airplanes had miniature versions of them, and all fighters have speed brakes. Since jet engines are a little slow on acceleration compared to props, most carrier landing approaches were once made with the brakes out, making more power immediately available for wave-offs or bolters by closing the speed brakes as full throttle was added. Okay, I have the airplane. Spoilers now.
I see what you mean about spoiler effectiveness, Captain. Really throws you against the shoulder harness, don't they?
Yes, I have them full out now so we can descend rapidly, keeping the speed below the 80-knot max landing gear down speed. Gear extension is much easier than retraction, thanks to gravity, but I'll let you do the honors. Now, please. Good. St. Mary's traffic, motor glider 62 Sierra X-ray, entering high downwind for runway 29 dead stick, St. Mary's. Half brakes now, 1,000 feet per minute descent, left turn. St. Mary's traffic, motor glider 62 Sierra X-ray, left base, runway 29, dead stick. Rolling out of the turn on runway heading, a little high and fast, more spoiler. St. Mary's traffic, motor glider 62 Sierra X-ray, on final for 29, dead stick. Passing 10 feet, begin the flare, spoilers in a little, touchdown 3-point attitude, full spoilers out, prop lever to unfeathered, mags on, engine start, and turn off onto the taxiway. Well, we cheated death again, Mike. Take her to the barn, swing the tail wheel left to line us up for pushback, and I'll read the shutdown checklist to you. Then you can exit and give me a hand getting out.
The disembarkation, wing fold, and pushback into the hangar done. They were soon on eastbound on Route 4.
Well, you done good, Mike. What do you think?
Thanks, Captain. It's still sinking in. But what an incredible experience. I can't thank you enough. Soaring is certainly an entirely different world to itself. A man in a simple machine, as close to nature as it gets, like sailing, with unmatched serenity. I feel as though I have been meditating for 2 hours, even though it keeps you busy. You have to pay attention to flying the glider all the time, to react to all the subtle or dramatic changes in lift conditions, don't you? I was surprised by how tightly you have to turn, 45 to 60 degrees bank angle, to stay near the center of thermals. I was taught that you lose half your lift in tight turns.
That's correct, and that's why you carry extra speed in the turns, but the trade-off makes it worthwhile since lift is so much stronger in the center of typical thermals. I say typical because the greatest truth about soaring is that there are no great truths. Every day is different. During the summer, when towering cumulus clouds develop, I often ventured into them. The base of cumulus clouds here averages 4,000 feet and are formed by strong thermals below. When you first enter them, they seem quite benign. Often there is a smooth, steady 300 feet per minute climb. But as you get higher, the lift accelerates and it gets more turbulent. Then it often gets so cold and wet and turbulent, I had to tighten my shoulder harness to keep from hitting my head on the canopy. I've seen nearly 2,000 feet per minute sustained climb rate on the vertical speed indicator, and visibility so limited I couldn't see the wings. It becomes difficult to keep airspeed under control, with the needle rapidly fluctuating between 40 and 100 knots while keeping the lift centered. That's when I chicken out, pop the spoilers, and level the wings for the nearest exit. I've ridden these elevators to nearly 13,000 feet. Everything instantly goes back to peace and sunshine. When you leave the cloud, you turn to look back to see the impressive sight of what you've just been in and how near you came to the top. Sometimes I was close, but never all the way out the top. Then you look out across the skyscape to an incredible sight of being high above many of the other towering cumulus clouds. The instant change from hanging on for dear life in a wild roller coaster ride with zero visibility to the suddenly dramatic, peaceful, and magnificent view were simply some of the most breathtaking and satisfying adventures I ever had in an airplane.
Cloud flying sounds like extreme soaring, Captain. Is that where the flying expression, exploring the envelope, comes from?
Yes, it is, Mike. The envelope refers to an airplane's performance diagram, a graphic chart of an airplane's limitations, showing how slow, fast, and high, with other graphs of things like climb and turn rates, G limits, max range and speeds, etc. It's important for all pilots, but most especially fighter pilots, to explore and learn to fly his airplane most effectively to its limits by feel when the chips are down and the consequences final.
So fighter pilots are special, Captain.
Oh, hell yes, Mike. Just ask Chuck Yeager, or any of them, and they'll look at you like you are the simplest sumbitch that ever walked. Truth is, the biggest difference is the size of their egos. Nevertheless, there is a difference in the nature of the fighter mission and the airplanes designed for it. As fighter pilots are fond of saying, there are two kinds of airplanes, fighters and targets. As nasty as war is, there's the unique nobility of just one higher and faster man in his machine against another in his machine in life or death aerial combat. There is a genuine lore that dates back to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So it goes with the territory that self-confidence can be as crucial to a fighter pilot as knowing his aircraft's performance envelope.
How do other pilots regard fighter jocks, Captain?
Mostly with tolerant amusement, I think. They're seen as girl-chasing, booze-hound, braggadocio kids, playing with expensive toys which have little practical value until they get bombs hung on them. The fact is that there has been almost nothing of the dogfights of World War II. Ever after the U.S. had unchallenged air superiority. So who needed fighters taking up flight deck space? Still, there was an undeniable, though irrational, social and professional hierarchy within the pilot community, which put fighter pilots at the top of the heap, followed by attack pilots and others, with multi-engine bomber, patrol, or transport pilots at the bottom. Oddly, the pilot selection systems in military aviation reinforce this hierarchy. I was in carrier squadrons of all types, and in my opinion, there's not a nickel's difference in the average level of pilot flying ability between squadron types.
Well, Captain, we have safely arrived at Heritage Pines with an hour to spare. I'd like to go to the inn to wash and change. May I meet you in the lobby in about 45 minutes?
Well, Captain, we have safely arrived at Heritage Pines with an hour to spare. I'd like to go to the inn to wash and change. May I meet you in the lobby in about 45 minutes?
Thank you, Captain. The pleasure and honor was mine, I assure you. Don't know about that naval aviator part, though. My grandpa told me that if I joined the Navy, I might never be sure who the father of my children was.
Mike, that applies to all fathers. Revelation.
In the time to prepare for dinner, Mike came to the decision that the time was at hand for confessing his true identity to his father, tonight after dinner.
A great meal, Captain. Thank you. What a beautiful dining room.
Yes, it really is nice, isn't it? This building was built in 1937 as a private lodge by a wealthy Baltimore millionaire, with 27 guest rooms on the second floor overlooking Swan Lake, now occupied by residents who prefer hotel-style accommodations. The Heritage Pines folks have done a good job of maintaining everything in this building in its original configuration, condition, fixtures, furnishings, and amenities. The 20-foot high ceilings here in the lobby and dining room are all original local wood, with a variety of other woods used to inlay Indian designs. That huge stone fireplace there is functional. There's always a big cozy fire going in it when the temperature warrants.
Where do you live, Captain?
The rest of us live in the new quad facility down the street, which you haven't seen because it's hidden by a line of trees planted there for the purpose of preserving the original environment of this building. The building is in a square around a covered atrium. The ground floor is mostly game and meeting rooms, plus an office, small cafeteria, and nurses' station. There are 106 single or two-bedroom unfurnished apartments with small kitchenettes and living rooms. Housekeeping services are provided weekly. There are 3 16-passenger vans to haul us around to all kinds of activities, but many residents have their own vehicles. It all works out quite well. There's something for everyone. Would you like to sit a while here in the lobby?
Sure. A very impressive place, Captain. I can see myself somewhere like this one day if I'm lucky.
Lucky is the word, Mike. I have certainly had more than my share of it, for sure. Before we get back to talking about my life in Germany, let's talk about you for a change, all right?
There's little to tell, Captain. As I said, one town, one job, one wife, one family. What else can I tell you?
Well, let's go back to the question of why you are really here, Mike.
The reasons I gave you were all true, Captain. I want to write your story.
Yeah, Mike, I got that, but I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around why you want to do a book about a Vietnam-era naval aviator. You have obviously gone way out of your way to be here, so my question still is, why me? Really, Mike, is that the only reason you are here? The book?
Thank God he had already decided to tell the whole truth, Michael thought. He would have been in a hell of a fix if he hadn't.
To be truthful, Captain, not the only reason. Someone told me a lot about you, and I wanted to meet you.
Someone, like your mother Emma or your wife Martha, maybe?
When did you figure me out?
The day before you came here.
How?
No stranger has been here to see me in years. So when Georgie told me someone was coming, I got curious and called Bob at the Waterman's Inn to find out who had reservations. Guess whose name popped up before you changed it to Sabino? You're an old fart yourself now, but the Sousa mark on you would have given you away anyhow, despite the facial hair and glasses. Didn't you think it was odd that I didn't ask any probing questions about your family, hometown, or background? I was sparing you the eventual humiliation of confession. So why this charade, Mike? And what's your motive after all these years?
I sincerely apologize for the deception, Captain. I thought you might not want to see me. I guess the reason for coming was closure, whatever that means. And I am serious about the book. I do want to tell your story, partly so I can try to understand you and myself better. What little I know about you is quite colorful. I sure hope you don't think I'm a buzzard circling for an inheritance.
Inheritance? Now that's amusing. Obviously, you have no idea what these homes charge. In any event, I followed my granny's advice and made myself worth more alive than dead. So, should I call you son?
Yes, sir.
Touché, you got me there. Mike and Captain it shall be. We never got closely acquainted with the dad-son bit, did we? But if you have any axes to grind with me about that, go for it and get it over with. Note this, however, on balance I have no regrets. No one is putting me on a deathbed guilt trip. Nevertheless, I promise to listen as patiently as I can and tell you anything you want to know.
There will be no axe grinding from me, Captain. Life with my mother, plus my own failures as a husband and father, long ago erased whatever blame I assigned to you in the past. No one can justly judge a marriage from the outside, can they? I'm here to know you and myself better by writing your story. I hope that we can be friends. That's all.
That's fine with me, Mike. So be it. Truly, I am happy that you are here. I'm not sure that telling my side of the story will accomplish anything positive. I have no wish to affect your memory of your mother. The important thing is that she seems to have done a fine job of raising you. History between me and her is of little consequence now. In any event, in the interest of keeping my story in context, I'd like to stay on some semblance of a timeline. So I'll say just one thing about your mother for now. We made our peace with each other several times. Over the years, during subsequent failed relationships, it occasionally crossed my mind that, everything considered, Emma and I might as well have made a better effort at making a go of it. At the time, however, that was not an option, as you will see. Early on, your Martha stayed in touch with my mother, so she had a positively biased source of information on me.
I agree that it will be better to keep events in sequence, Captain. I don't have urgent questions now, but there's no need to be concerned about my image of my mother. Her version of your story was pretty transparent, and I found her correspondence with the Navy about your marriage, so I already have a good idea what happened and why. She had a way of making life difficult for herself, pioneering single mothers' rights. You are quite correct, though. Emma was a very loving mother, and she did her ultimate best to raise me right. I miss her very much.
I'm sure you do, Mike. She was a special lady. Well, it has been a memorable day, hasn't it? Shall we call it a night and sleep on it?
It has been a perfect day, Captain. Thanks to you for it all. The Shamango flight and dinner was fantastic. All along I felt guilty about my identity deception. I'd already decided to come clean with you tonight, but feared the consequences. I can't express how relieved I am that you made matters easy for me.
Since I knew all along, Mike, I share your guilt by not clearing up the matter right at the beginning. So let's just call it even and move on. With regard to us moving on, one more thing while we're at it. I'm sorry we got so crossed up with our last communications 40 years ago, when I got fed up with Martha's inconsiderate behavior toward my mother on her Bermuda cruise, and you took Martha's side. After that, I simply did not see how I could reach you. Then, when you separated, it seemed too much time had passed to fix it better, to let sleeping dogs lie.
I'm sorry about that too, Captain. All I can say is that those were difficult years. By the time I got back on track, it seemed too late to me too. So, can we call that even as well, and move on?
Absolutely, Mike. Let those matters rest in peace. It has been a perfect day for me as well. I'd like to ask you to bunk in my place. To save you some money, at the rate we're going, you'll be here a long time. But I'm in a one-bedroom apartment, and there simply isn't room, I'm sorry to say.
Quite all right. I'm very comfortable and well settled at the inn. Besides, I wouldn't want to risk wearing out my welcome, Captain.
Okay, then let's call it a night and resume same time and place in the morning. Germany.
Mike answered his phone at Waterman's Inn.
Good morning, Mike. It's Georgie. I hope I didn't disturb you.
Not at all, Georgie. Is everything all right?
Oh, yes, I just called to ask if you would stop by my office a little early before you meet the captain. There's a matter I'd like to discuss if you have time.
Sure, Georgie. Is 9 o'clock okay?
Perfect. See you then. Mysterious, Mike thought. What's this about? Maybe she heard about our humongo flight and a butt chewing is coming?
Good morning, Georgie. How are you?
Good morning, Mike. I'm fine, thanks. Did you enjoy your flight with the captain yesterday?
Uh-oh. Looks like I've been busted. Yes, it was a most enjoyable flight, Georgie. I hope you're not upset. We just didn't want to worry you. The captain is very safe and competent. Plus, I have some pilot experience too. How did you hear about us?
Just teasing, Mike. I wasn't worried or the least upset. After all, the captain is old enough to make those decisions for himself, isn't he? And he has been flying for some time, right? One of the busybody porch pilots, as the captain aptly calls them, called me last night. Small town, you know, so it doesn't take much to make the news. Since the captain's airplane is distinctively different, it's easily recognized. As far as I know, this is his first flight in a number of years, so I do admit that I'm relieved to hear it went well. I'll bet he is really happy to have you here now.
I think so, Georgie, and so am I. In fact, I took advantage of the good mood last night to confess my identity. It turns out that the captain knew all along. He called Bob at the inn the day you told him about a visitor to see who had registered. I had to use my real name to use my Visa card, so it was easy for him to blow my cover. Anyhow, he says the score is even between us since he didn't say something earlier. Now we can drop the Sabino alias. Thank God.
That's great, Mike. I'm so glad. I take it that you may be here longer than you thought then.
Yes, Georgie, possibly. So far in his story, the captain is only 16 years old. Now, with the flying and my identity resolved, this may be a long-term effort.
In that case, the reason I asked you to stop by this morning is that I may have some good news for you, Mike. As happenstance would have it, an upstairs room here has become temporarily available, one of the nicest, in the back overlooking the lake. The gentleman, Major Underwood, who lives there, has accepted the pleas of his daughter to live with her in England. Since he is not sure that it will work out, he has retained the room by paying the rent a year in advance. He put his personal effects in storage. Otherwise, his is the only room with the original 1937 furnishings. I took the liberty of discussing your situation with the Major by email, and he has very graciously offered the room to you rent-free, with the understanding that you may have to vacate on short notice should he decide to return. The only expense for you would be your meals in the dining room. How does that sound?
As happenstance would have it, Georgie, it sounds perfect. I just hope the captain wouldn't feel that I'm closing in on him. I'd hate to wear out my welcome.
Yes, he does value his privacy, I know, but I think you'll work it out. Your book project seems an ideal link. Flying will be a wonderful bond, too. So why don't you have a look at the room? If you like it, discuss it with the captain, and we'll go from there. Here are the keys. You may take the stairs, but it's a bit of a climb with our high ceiling down here. So better still, ride the original Otis elevator up over there on the other side of the hallway by the desk. It's room number 103.
Thank you so much, Georgie. I'll get back to you later today.
The room was gorgeously furnished in the style of the 30s, with a massive carved mahogany cannonball bed with matching dresser and bedside tables, complemented by Tiffany lamps, an extravagantly ornate oriental carpet, rich colonial blue velvet drapes, crystal chandelier, and cheerfully patterned wallpaper. The large marble-tiled bathroom was fitted out with original-style, gold-plated fixtures, including a bathtub with lion's claw feet and a separate shower. The ambiance of the room, with the tranquil view of the lake and the woods beyond, gave Mike the feeling of having been transported 90 years back to the days when the lodge was built.
It all seemed very fitting to Mike's mission of recording his father's past. After all, since levitation is possible, why not time travel? Surely some force was at work. Call it what you wish, happenstance, providence, or divine intervention.
Good morning, Captain. Sleep well?
Yes, indeed. In fact, I had a Shamangal flying dream last night. I saw your car out front early. What's up?
Georgie called to ask me to stop in to see her.
Uh-oh. I'll bet she got wind of our flight from one of those nosy porch pilots. Probably Peg-Leg John.
I don't know who called her, but you are correct. However, that wasn't what she wanted to talk about. Georgie seems fine with our flying. She says you're old enough to decide. The topic was Major Underwood's room.
Oh, yes, fine British chap. The Major left here 3 weeks ago to stay with his daughter at the family home in England. Her husband, who was titled nobility, passed away recently and left her to manage their home, which is something of a palace. One of those estates which are affordable only if they are open to public tours. George should fit in quite well as an authentic guide. He is a very agreeable and intelligent raconteur, as all Brits seem to be. He said he is keeping his room here, in case being a castle keeper doesn't work for him. Don't tell me the room has been offered to you.
That's it, Captain. I just looked at it. It's perfect, and the price is right. Free. But I'm not sure I should take it. I wouldn't want you to feel I was crowding you.
Crowding? Nonsense, Mike. Makes great sense. By all means, take it. Heritage Pines is big enough for the both of us. If I didn't think so, I wouldn't be bashful about saying so, would I?
No, I don't think you would, Captain. I understand that bashful is an unlikely trait to be found in fighter pilots, right up there with humble, I hear. Okay then, I'll take it. I do love this place, and it will save me a bundle. I hope Major Underwood enjoys being a docent, because at the rate we are going, this book project may take a while. I'm glad you had another flying dream. Do you think our flight inspired it?
Yes, I do, Mike. I had pretty much lost hope of flying the Chimango again. None of those porch pilots will fly with me, or anyone else for that matter. It would take a stick of dynamite up their butts to get any one of those tree-sitting, nose-picking turkeys airborne. All they do is hang around the ready room, playing solitaire, pointing the scheming finger of scorn at everyone else, and convincing themselves they are the most enlightened intellectuals of the century. They're such screwballs they actually believe they invented a perpetual motion machine, which they have somehow been unable to demonstrate for 20 years. I had all the fun I could stand with them early on, but when the pukin' dogs are in town, I set them loose on them. The porch pilots will never get over those episodes. Anyhow, as you said, let's get on with passing through. Where were we?
It's May 1949, Captain. You're 16 and just passed through Portland, Maine for a family gathering en route to Germany.
Right. My parents and I boarded a troop ship in New York for a 10-day passage to Bremerhaven. It was Mother's and my third ocean passage, but the first with Father. We saw little of him, though, since the men and women were in separated berthing spaces. It was a smooth trip in fair weather all the way, after winter storms and before hurricane season. I loved being at sea again and spent every minute on deck watching the waves. From Bremerhaven, we traveled south by train to Augsburg. It had been only 4 years since the end of the war, so there was still much evidence of the vast scope of destruction on the landscape, as well as in the faces of the people, especially in the British and Russian zones, where the victors' emotions ran deeper and their reconstruction interests did not. In the American zone, there were fewer signs of devastation, but it was difficult to adapt to the Germans' prolonged, expressionless stares at us. Cities like Nuremberg were 75% destroyed, estimated from the evidence of aerial photos. Nevertheless, streets had been cleared of rubble, and old ladies carried stones and bricks to rebuild the shells of cathedrals and downtown buildings. Old men had small children pick up GI's cigarette butts for them. The trains, buses, trucks, streetcars, and cabs were running, but there were few private vehicles except bicycles, motorbikes, and motorcycles. There were no signs of a functioning economy. The only business operating was the black market, against a law which was rarely enforced. Nearly all GIs and dependents, including us kids, sold or traded ration post-exchange cigarettes, coffee, candy, and food with the Germans. The most popular currency was cigarettes, which were rationed 1.5 cartons each week at the PX for $1 per carton. We kept 5 packs to smoke and sold the carton on the black market for $20 in marks, a very generous allowance for a kid over there in those days. Many families took advantage of the market by trading for priceless antiques, but most GIs found other ways to spend their money. Beer and wine sold in the beer halls for 12 cents a liter. And we're talking serious beer, Mike, up to 16%. Then consider the fact that there were 8 million more German women than men after the war. The Jews were not the only ones killed in World War II, nor for that matter the only ones to die in Nazi concentration camps.
Captain, you're not suggesting that the Germans were victims, are you?
Of course not, Mike. Except for children, there are no innocent civilians in wars. All adults share the responsibility for their nation's acts. Hitler had good reason to believe that he was carrying out the will of the German people. But did you know that all the Nazis in Germany had been killed? There was not a single one left alive anywhere. We knew that because all the Kraut survivors proclaimed that they always hated Hitler and had never been Nazis. Those hundreds of thousands of Sieg Heiling civilians filmed at places like Nuremberg in 1939, plus the animals who ran the camps, all dead. Imagine that, Mike. All dead. And of course, not a one of the survivors had any idea what was happening in the concentration camps until we rounded them all up and marched them through the camps immediately after the war, with everything in place just as we found them, with thousands of stacked up rotting corpses shot in the backs of their heads when the bastards ran out of gas for the ovens. I'm simply pointing out the numbers, Mike. Millions of German women were aging widows with children, but without financial means or homes. Marriage and job opportunities for women were nil. The rich GIs were obviously the most natural and attractive survival option.
As a baptized Southern Baptist, Captain, how did you feel about such behavior by these women?
I found it difficult to believe in hell, Mike. Many German women were making survival choices in desperate situations that their American sisters would never have to face. So German women would be damned, but American women saved? Everyone believes he acts on rational reasons for the choices he makes in life and death situations. Who's to judge?
What about the morality of the GIs, Captain?
Not for me to judge, Mike. Many young GIs were enjoying their first freedom away from home in a foreign land and did not handle the booze well. But I don't want to give you a one-sided impression. Historically, virtually all of our military men behaved admirably overseas in peace as well as war. By 1949, few of the GIs in Germany had experienced the war firsthand, so they felt little animosity toward the Germans. Many GIs compassionately contributed to the survival of the elderly and children in the villages and on the farms. As in all wars, millions of GIs came home with war brides, sometimes much to the chagrin of their families. Imagine what it was like to take a girl from Munich home to the folks on the farm in Mississippi. I expect there were many regrets and unhappy outcomes for all, Captain. War isn't the only possible hell on earth, is it? Indeed not, Mike. I had already seen many of these war brides married to guys in fathers' bands in the States before we went to Germany. German women were accustomed to the authoritarian oppression of European men and courts, but very soon learned their U.S. rights over their kinder, gentler American husbands. It was a gruesome thing to witness. I should have learned that it is not possible to import a foreign wife into the U.S. and not to expect her to change into an American, but I didn't.
I look forward to hearing more about that. But how were the Germans governed, and what was their attitude, Captain?
During that transition to self-rule, the American zone was governed by the State Department's HICOG civilian government. The Army administered operation of many of the hotels and resorts. Army military police did a good job keeping the GIs out of trouble, and the German police kept civil order. The Germans were compliant because they were just damn glad the war was over and that they were not in the Russian zone. Their defeat was complete, and there was no fight left in them. The closest thing to a German uprising was when they successfully stopped the army from chlorinating the Munich water system, the prime ingredient in their beer. Still, the trains soon ran on time again, as they were famous for doing under Nazi rule. American dependents were housed in homes of owners who were generously compensated and resettled elsewhere. In the interest of boosting employment, each American household was provided a full-time maid. U.S. high schools were consolidated at major cities like Munich, Frankfurt, Nuremberg, and Heidelberg. I attended Munich High, a 2-hour train ride from Augsburg, which meant the boys' dormitory for me, with most weekends at home. Hallelujah, escape. There were only 200 of us in the entire student body at Dependence School Division for the High School Department, Munich, Germany. The boys' dormitory at 85 Harthauserstrasse was a 3-story private mansion with a swimming pool and tennis court in Harleching, one of Munich's finest undamaged residential neighborhoods. Our dorm supervisor was an Episcopal minister who was on a sabbatical leave of absence from the ministry to dry out from drug abuse, apparently without success. He stayed in his room when we were there, even during mealtime. We very rarely saw or heard from him. Consequently, we were on our own, without supervision. We came and went at any hour of the night, and there was no minimum drinking age in the Munich beer halls and nightclubs. Free at last. The GIs, who were under much stricter supervision and restrictions, hated us with a passion. Why should kids have so much more freedom than they had? Fortunately, we were smart enough to realize that if we didn't keep a lid on our actions, our fathers would be in trouble with the army, and our freedoms would quickly end. The Munich girls' dorm, on the other hand, was an entirely different matter. Security went to the opposite extreme of a near prison. They had a controlling middle-aged bitch, Mrs. Mansour, known as Mrs. Man-Sour, always visible, to the point of entering the girls' rooms unannounced at all hours. Bused to and from school, the girls were otherwise allowed out only for supervised activities, such as our teen club. Boys were allowed only in the living room after school, before dinner. German security guards, armed with automatic weapons, patrolled the dormitory grounds day and night, and warned the girls sneaking a smoke to go back inside off the balconies. So, compared to the kids of parents stationed in Munich and living at home, we dorm boys were far freer, while the girls living at home were much freer than the dorm girls.
Quite a change from Georgia. Captain. But with all the availability of beer and German girls, wasn't there even more opportunity for those bird nests in your hair?
No, Mike. Thankfully, the changes in Germany were all positive. We rarely interacted with Germans. It was May, near the end of my junior year when we arrived, so I had only 6 weeks before summer vacation at home in Augsburg. Academically, I was way over my head, but the outstanding teachers made allowances for kids like me, and I felt very thankful for the warm welcome of my classmates.
Well, that was a short escape from home for you then. How did the summer go, Captain?
Surprisingly great, other than a curfew. Father said that if I lived at home until I was 90, I would still have to be home by 11 o'clock. No doubt he was encouraging my permanent escape, too. Initially, I sometimes hung around the band quarters with Father, who was now a master sergeant and acting band leader. I especially enjoyed rehearsals and started practicing on a baritone, but that ended in tears of frustration for me when I was unable to play a difficult passage well enough to satisfy Father's impatient rage. I didn't go back and did not touch another instrument for 10 years. Otherwise, as always before, I was left to my own devices. My only schoolmate in Augsburg was Johnny Bell, a tall, blonde, curly-haired, blue-eyed, slap-happy, and agreeable pal a year younger. We rode our bikes for miles into the countryside and through the pristine Bavarian forests, where trees were planted in rows and all undergrowth was cleared away. There was little traffic on the roads, and bicycles were by far the most used vehicles, so bikes were safe to ride anywhere. On one outing, we found a riding stable and rented horses, my first ride since Panama. We rode the horses into the woods, slowly because the horses weren't responding to our urgings. As soon as we turned around, headed for the barn, however, we had a hell of a fast ride home. Augsburg was a relatively small city, noted during the war for being home to the Messerschmitt airplane factory, which manufactured their most widely used fighter of the war, the Bf-109. Only the twisted steel beams of the factory remained, and there were no signs of reconstruction interests at the site. About the only businesses open were Gasthaus beer halls, where besides 1-liter mugs of beer, the fare mainly consisted of delicious breads, pickles, and wurst. At home, we had Elsa, our likable, tough, hard-working, sinewy, middle-aged maid. Also with the house came a dirty, all-white cat with the shakes. Shaky was dirty because she didn't groom herself. Except for that and being shaky, which we ascribed to shell shock, she was normal. Then my parents bought a puppy. Not just any puppy, but Brando von der Maria, the son of the champion Schäferhund of all Germany, Krallo von Houndstetten. Brando and I got along beautifully. When he was small, his doghouse was big enough for both of us, and he loved to roughhouse as hard as we could. He would bite without ever breaking skin, just hard enough to raise fast-healing welts. Brando loved Shaky, too. They ate from the same bowl, and Brando often picked up Shaky by the scruff of her neck, vigorously shaking her back and forth, with tail and legs a blur. Shaky took all this with good nature, but when she tried to walk away, Brando often flattened her with a big paw on her shoulder and picked her up again for more shaking. Mother feared for Shaky's survival as Brando grew. Then Shaky disappeared. Meat was hard to come by for Germans, and it wasn't uncommon for them to eat dogs, so there weren't many running loose in the hood. Boxers were rumored to be their favorites. Schäferhunds were so revered and expensive, however, they hardly ever ended up in a stew. Finally, Mother confessed to having given Shaky to Elsa to dispose of to a hungry family. Tells you something about Maine farm girls, doesn't it, Mike? Anyhow, a few weeks later, as the song goes, the cat came back, and there was no more talk of eating Shaky. Brando was so happy to see her, he gave her a good shake. One afternoon, Johnny and I were walking down Main Street when we noticed 2 girls looking in a shop window. The shop wasn't open, but there was a window display of women's clothes announcing the date of a grand opening. Language was not a problem for Americans, since most Germans had been taught proper British English in school and spoke it better than we did. If a girl would not speak English, it was assumed that she did not wish to be seen with Americans. These girls appeared to be our age and were nicely dressed. One wore tight gray slacks, revealing a most lovely round derriere. This was my first encounter with a German girl, so I was nervous. Still, bolstered by Johnny's courage, I approached. I was relieved that they didn't run away, and they did speak English. Lola, the girl in slacks, looked as good from the front and was very charming. "Whatever Lola wants, Lola gets?" I asked, quoting a popular song. "Of course," she replied with a demure smile. I was in love. The four of us walked to the park and sat on a bench. It turned out that the girls were not German. They were Lithuanian displaced persons, DPs, living in a nearby compound. Lola's real name was Grarina Benevicus, perhaps the Lithuanian version of my middle family name, Benavides. Finally, we asked them to dinner, and we went to the Cave, the place to go in Augsburg, appropriately decorated with stalactites and stalagmites. Many GIs were there with young ladies from the same DP compound, which also had an 11 p.m. curfew for the girls. Unlike the Munich High girls' dorm, however, there were no set visiting hours at the compound, and everyone stayed up late partying in the grand living room. So Lola and I had little time alone, except on long walks and chats in the park. To pass our time together, Lola often asked me to make up stories, which I accomplished from the plots of the hundreds of movies I had seen, some 6 times over while working at the village theater. As fate would have it, however, Lola was soon to leave. She was being sponsored by a farm family in Castana, Iowa, and therefore had to keep herself together, meaning no sex. That's what I meant in response to your bird's nest question, Mike. Still, it was a wonderful experience. Our last night together, I blew curfew. We went to Lola's room, and I didn't get home until daybreak. Nothing was said about it. It turned out that one of the band members was dating a girl at the compound too, and he had been keeping my father informed about me and Lola. So I guess they cut me some slack that night.
Did you hear from Lola after she left for Iowa, Captain?
Yes, I'm glad to say I did. I was highly honored when Lola wrote that she could be happily married to a boy like me. I hope she was. A boy like me would be lucky to be married to a girl like her.
Great, Captain. A nice story. I guess your introduction to intimacy with Elaine was good training?
Yes, Mike, right on through the next 7 years with 4 more girlfriends and 2 casual encounters with older German women. Was it my karma or providence? Still, I rationalized that I was keeping my eyes on the prize, flying. Besides, I further rationalized that intimacy might be the best part of loving for me. Perhaps to be lost after graduating to the rough stuff.
Quite a summer, Captain.
Yes, but after Lola left, Johnny's older brother, Kay, arrived, and I saw little of Johnny after that. So I spent a good deal of time riding my bike alone. One day I stopped in the woods and sat on the ground next to my bike, twirling a pedal. My thoughts turned to flying, wondering if it would come to pass for me. Soon I was in an imagined conversation with God. "How badly do you want to fly?" he asked. "More than anything," I replied. "More than life?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Suppose I tell you that if you fly, within 10 years as a pilot, you will have to sacrifice your life in combat to save a comrade. Would you do that? God asked. Yes, I would, God, I said.
Well, Captain, you did fly, and I see you are still living?
Thankfully, yes, Mike, but the dramatic rest of that story will come. Summer was over, and it was time to go back to school for my senior year. There was such a high turnover of students during the summer that I was something of an old-timer at the dorm, so I settled in quickly. Of course, there was more cohesion among the local Munich kids since they have the summer together. Nevertheless, there was an open welcome and genuine camaraderie among all of us. Army brats truly are a uniquely outstanding bunch of highly mature people, Mike. Since there were so many coming and going, with such little time to get acquainted, the girls formed a society called the PPDs, Pookie Peroxided Dames, named for the identifying streak in their hair, pretty racy stuff for 1949. One of the PPD functions was to expedite pairing up girls with boyfriends. My PPD designated girlfriend was a lovely tall girl named Virginia Ginger Carmichael, who suited me fine, except that she was a dorm girl from Berchtesgaden, so we had little opportunity to get acquainted. Sound familiar? Our only private lights-out time together was during a gathering at one of the PPD's homes while the parents were away. Since we were virtual strangers, it was rather awkward. At the winter formal dance, December 21st, 1949, I wrote in Ginger's dance card, "Ginger, I will remember tonight, and you, the rest of my life. I think you're the swellest girl I've ever known, and I like you very much." A few days later, Ginger said that she would rather not go steady any longer. Still, there is a photo of us together at the girls' dorm in the yearbook.
Was that a word-for-word dance card quote, Captain?
An exact word-for-word quote, Mike. I wouldn't make up something so corny now.
Very impressive memory, Captain. How is it that you recall it?
I have a good reason to, Mike, as you will see, much later.
You must have been heartbroken when Ginger dumped you.
I didn't take the heave-ho too hard, Mike. Soon after, there was a tug on my jacket sleeve in the school hallway. It was so dark I could barely see that it was Orally Winky Jones, a PPD member who wrote the In Tune with the Teens column in the Army's Stars and Stripes newspaper. "We're having a party at Jones' house Saturday night. Want to go?" she asked. "I'm supposed to go home this weekend," I replied. "Call your parents and tell them you're not coming," she said. And so I did. One of my serious flaws with women is that I am easy. All the PPDs except Orally were in established relationships. A few had gone all the way. So shortly after the party began, the other couples drifted off to various rooms and the lights went out. There I was, sitting on a couch in the dark, engaged in heavy petting with a stranger named Winky, my new steady.
Any port in a storm, Captain?
Yes, well, there wasn't much of a storm, Mike, but it was a hell of a port. Aurelie, a junior, was a town girl living with her mother Helen, two younger sisters, baby brother, and stepfather Clayton, a high-ranking civilian public relations director with the HICOG government, who looked exactly like Teddy Roosevelt, in a two-story harlotching mansion. Helen was an exceptionally dynamic, intelligent, and interesting woman. She had been a professional student at the University of Chicago during the Depression. That is, she had 8 years of college without earning a degree because she only took courses which interested her. She had authored several published children's books. As it is still, the University of Chicago is regarded the capital of socialism. In Helen's time, intellectuals in many countries cited the Depression as a failure of capitalism and embraced communism as the alternative solution. They weren't promoting armed revolution. They just wanted change and were quite open about it. Wendell Willkie, a viable presidential candidate, represented the Socialist Party. Helen was one of those who supported him. After divorcing her husband Mackie, Helen moved to a commune in Greenwich Village with the girls and came to know most of the famous people associated with the communist movement. Many of them were later called before the infamous witch hunt McCarthy congressional hearings. By then, however, Helen had married Clayton, bore his son, and moved to Munich. Helen was an avid antique collector and spent every dime to take full advantage of black market opportunities. She warehoused a huge collection of antique art, furniture, silver, crystal, statues, and 2 Steinway grand pianos, enough for 3 later Vermont auctions to sell the things she didn't wish to keep. Reflecting the financial dedication of her efforts, as well as her past commune lifestyle, Helen reduced family expenses to a bare minimum to finance her black market activities. For example, Aurelie had a winter coat which was obviously made from a white Army hospital blanket. Compared to my quiet, ordered existence, Helen's home was total chaos to me, but it seemed to work okay for them. Pretty, Aurelie resembled Audrey Hepburn, though not so thin as she. She was a standout in school society. I was no genius, but I was riding high too. I lettered in football and track, and I was elected president of the student council. Aurelie and I were a hot item. For the next 3 years, we spent much of our time together. In the evenings, Aurelie's family retired to an upstairs living room and left us alone downstairs, where we turned out the lights for hot and heavy sessions of petting. Aurelie was so passionate that she sometimes fainted. Still, no rough stuff. We were also such fast friends that we were virtually inseparable. Aurelie fit in so well with my friends that they voluntarily included her as one of the boys in our activities. Dave Dixon, a senior Munich resident who seemed destined to be a Supreme Court judge, made a certificate proclaiming me and Aurelie as the Duke and Duchess of Harleching. The only disagreement Aurelie and I had was that she said she wished to have 4 children. I wanted no more than 1 because of the disarray I saw in her home. It was during this time I began sailing. Lake Starnberg, 35 miles south of Munich, is at the foot of the snow-capped Bavarian Alps. The yacht club was being used as an army recreation center, but the Germans operated the marina, where we were told that we needed a license to rent a sailboat. I had earned a Red Cross life-saving card that summer for a job as lifeguard teaching preschool kids how to swim at the boys' dorm pool for 50 cents an hour. We successfully convinced the marina manager that my Red Cross card was my sailing qualification. Wanderer was a beautiful 35-foot classic varnished wooden hull racer with no engine. So it was miraculous that we landlubbers were able to sail her out of and back into the marina without a scratch. After that, we spent many great summer days sailing Wanderer on the lake. One highlight was a going-away party for Dan, who was leaving to attend Army Officer Candidate School. To celebrate the occasion, the 5 of us bought a 40-liter keg of Maibach beer at the Hofbrau Brewery, where I had an incident. When we came out of the brewery, We found the gate locked where we had entered, so we decided to climb over the iron fence, which was about 10 feet high, with iron spear-like spikes. As I jumped down, my class ring caught on a spike and stripped it off my finger along with a good bit of flesh. It looked so awful that we decided that a trip to the emergency room was in order. The German doctor on duty, who had obviously been through the war, looked at my finger and said, "Ach, superficial wound." He simply wrapped it up and told me to come back in a few days. When I did, the army doctor was horrified when he unwrapped it. "My God, who did this?" he exclaimed. Nevertheless, it healed well. But if that ring had been a little stronger, I would have lost the finger. Anyhow, the 5 of us set out to sea aboard Wanderer, provisioned with the 40-liter keg, more than 2 gallons each, for Pete, Chuck, Les, Dan, and me, with no food aboard. After several hours, Chuck noticed that we were sailing inside the course of a yacht race. When a girl on one of the boats waved back to him, we joined the race. We saw that we weren't gaining, so we began cutting inside the race course buoys. Even then, we fell so far behind that we gave up pursuit, tied the main sheet to the tiller, and tacked and jibed around in circles, with no one at the helm, which was fortunate, because on one circle we discovered Chuck in the water and hauled him back aboard. Since no one saw him fall over the side, Chuck would undoubtedly have drowned in the icy water if we had sailed a straight line. I still have photos of the event, but the only thing I remember after that was that each of us ordered 2 big hamburgers when we sailed back to the club, whereupon Pete, Chuck, and Dan passed out cold, sprawled on the lawn, leaving Les and me to eat 10 burgers, which of course made us very sick. American youth at our finest hour. One Sunday, Aurelie and I found that someone had run Wanderer over an underwater piling and sunk, so we rented a rowboat instead. We were more than a mile from the marina when a sudden vicious thunderstorm swept down on us from over the mountains. In a flash, we were in the midst of lightning and blinding rain, driven by 40-knot winds. It took all my strength on a single oar on one side to keep us pointed toward the marina. Still, we were being blown farther away as the waves built higher and higher. I waved to a passing motorboat, which came by to toss us a tow line. However, our elation was short-lived. We were towed at such high speed that our bow rose so high that water came in over the transom. When I went forward to try to level the boat and ask our rescuers to slow down, the entire rowboat dove underwater and broke the tow line. Aurelie went under with it, but I got a glimpse of her hair on the surface before she sank, and pulled her up as the powerboat circled back to help us aboard. After they dropped us off at the club, and just as we approached an iron bridge across the docks, it was struck by lightning. Some people came to help me get Aurelie to the bar. She was shivering hard and began to go into shock when she overheard that a 5-year-old boy had been lost over the side from a sailboat in the storm. She soon recovered, though, when we wrapped her up in towels and blankets and got a few shots of brandy into her.
Well, Captain, that was quite an introduction to life at sea. I see why you are so thankful for Jean's interventions. Did you live in the dorm the rest of your time in Germany?
No, Mike, the timeline is fuzzy in my memory about my parents' movements in Germany, but briefly, during my senior year, Father was transferred to Munich to take over a band from a drunk. Just a short aside about Father's leadership style. For 6 months in a row before he arrived, the Munich band had been awarded a live goat presented to the unit with the highest VD rate. In his first meeting with them in the band room, Father stood before the men with a straight razor in his hand and announced that the next man to contract VD in his band would lose his dick. The following month, the goat went to another unit and never returned. Father had a way of convincing men that he was dead serious and entirely capable of carrying out such threats.
I see that your father did not subscribe to a theory Y outlook on people as being honest, trustworthy, self-actualized, hard-working, and intelligent.
True, that's the way things were done in the Army then. Father was a Theory X person for sure, which says people are basically stupid, lazy, and dishonest. He epitomized the old traditional tough but fair dog-faced sergeant. He was an always right, perfectionist disciplinarian. His approach to leadership was to make his band so outstanding and successful, no matter how much ass-busting it took, that his men were proud to be in his bands. It didn't work that way for me. Though I admired and respected him in some ways, I felt no affection for him. If he stayed married to Mother for my sake, as he claimed, he blew that part of his life away.
Frankly, Captain, the way I see it, your father provided you with security, as well as strong, valuable guidance and role model example at just the right times in your life.
Quite true, Mike. As far as that goes, I was damned fortunate to have a good role model. So I won't defend my feelings further now. How could I? You weren't there, were you?
Sorry, Captain. Honestly, I did not mean to be judgmental. Please understand that some questions are meant to draw out some deeper emotions. I guess it's my courtroom experience backing up on me. Sometimes it is necessary to bear down on witnesses when you're going for the truth.
Come on, Mike, that sounds good, but it's not about truth in a courtroom. It's about badgering a witness to win a case, isn't it?
Sometimes, but not always. I'll keep in mind that we are not in court.
I've touched a nerve here, haven't I, Mike?
All right, Captain, if you wish. I didn't arrive here with a high degree of either affection or animosity. How could I? I only saw you several times, and you never did anything to cause me to believe you cared any more about me than your father did for you. So, I had reason for feeling the same about you. The revelation for me was when I had pretty much the same relationship with my own kids. Hopefully, now you will find some benefit in telling your story. The most valuable possession to many of us old guys is our stories, but no one wants to hear them. This is different. I truly do want to hear them. Shall we move on?
Not quite yet, Mike. I am long retired from tilting with windmills and those who do. As I told you, I have no regrets. One psychologist who once wrote about men as fathers, relative to women as mothers, summarized it this way: mother's love is constant. Father's love is earned. Even the mother of a serial killer will always love and forgive her son unconditionally, no matter what. Not so the father, who would more likely support execution of the SOB. One reason women were denied the vote for most of our history was the agreement that they tended to see the world through a kitchen window with the eyes of children, and are more likely to be ruled by irrational emotions. Women are genetically destined to bear and love children. Men, on the other hand, are designed to fight, hunt, and chase girls. Simple as that, just the way God created us. Marriage is a social invention, mostly for the purpose of raising children. The awful truth is that once Dad has done his impregnation and security duties, Mother naturally turns her love and attention to her children and shuts down on the old man in the inevitably correct expectation that he will stray to other beds, thereby socially justifying herself in cleaning him out in court. In Latin countries where divorce may not be considered an option, and after good Catholic mothers bear all the children they can stand, it's not unusual for fathers to take a mistress. As long as he's discreet about it, Mother gives tacit approval. So, Mike, I believe that infidelity and divorce is frequently not the husband's decision, though he may well not recognize it because of the guilt and punishment assigned to him. Another psychologist wrote that whereas boys once traditionally grew up alongside their fathers on the family farm or apprenticed in his profession, the Industrial Revolution resulted in separation between father and son, leaving boys in a female-dominated environment at home and at school. With less male identity, men tend to spend their lives with women like their mothers. But enough of that speech. I am grateful to have the opportunity to tell my story. I welcome your challenges too, Mike, as long as your expectations are realistic. After all, we are just two guys who happen to be related, trying to do our best in life. Now, where were we?
Okay, Captain. I'm glad for your views, which may be typical of fighter pilots. Nevertheless, my sense of it is that is only the public side of you, and that there is, or once was, a warmer side.
If so, Mike, I lost touch with it. A saying in naval aviation is that everyone shits on the good guy. There's no place for good guys in the cockpit of a fighter. The grisly truth is that most aerial combat victories are won by pilots who sneak up on their victims and shoot them in the back without them even knowing there was someone behind them. I must admit, however, that one value of recalling my youth now does stir up innocent passions and dreams. However chauvinistic some of my views may sound, I did once strongly believe that there was no higher purpose in life than to achieve a lasting, loving relationship. When I found myself in unhappy situations where that was not possible, I resumed the search. My own fault was in making wrong choices. I was too easygoing into relationships, but too demanding in expectations once in them. The fact is, however, that there is no way to predict how a marriage will work until you're into it, is there? So I was married 6 times. However, note the fact that I averaged 12 years and tried not to repeat the mistake of marrying the same type of woman twice. As Elizabeth Taylor once said, at least I was honest enough to marry them all.
I can relate to that, Captain. Back to Munich in 1950, your senior year, you said that your father was transferred to Munich, so you had to leave the dorm to live with them. Back to captivity and an 11 o'clock curfew.
Yes, but since I had Aurélie in my life most of the time, it didn't seem bad this time. The days flew by so fast, I cannot recall details now, but it was a good year. Thanks to Clayton's position, we saw all the Munich opera productions from Hitler's box. Our senior class trip was a voyage down the Rhine River aboard Hitler's yacht. Before graduation, however, Father was transferred back to Augsburg, and I went back to the dorm. First, another story about Father. Although he was still a master sergeant, he had served as the band leader in his 2 previous assignments, which is a warrant officer's job. When Father checked in at Augsburg, he discovered that there was a captain in another unit who had been assigned administrative command of the band. Father immediately went to General Abrams' office and demanded reassignment. If Father was not to be the commanding officer, he wanted no part of it. After considering the demand, General Abrams dismissed Father with the promise to take care of relieving the captain, and went back to reading. When the general looked up again, Father was still standing there. I said, "I'll take care of it, Sergeant." Dismissed. Father replied, "General, I'm not leaving until you tell the captain he is relieved of responsibility for the band." General Abrams called in his orderly and told him to inform the captain he had been relieved, and said to Father, "I admire your spunk, Sergeant." They became good friends. Abrams was determined to have Father promoted to warrant officer, but Father could not pass the band leader physical exam because of an eardrum punctured in childhood. Father said he also didn't want the promotion because it would mean a $60 pay cut. General Abrams took out his wallet and said he would make up the difference. It wasn't just about the pay, though. Because warrants were socially considered commissioned officers in the Army, promotion would entail all the mandatory social obligations for both of my parents. Father was uncomfortable with that prospect because of his Portuguese accent and his 10th grade education. Mother, in spite of her similar education, however, was not so socially unsure of herself and loved the idea of moving up from enlisted men and their wives to officers and their ladies. Eventually, General Abrams was successful in Father's promotion. During that second time in Augsburg, Brando and I went to police dog training school at a field with bombed-out buildings and craters. I was given bean bags with my scent, which I left at various locations across the field and hid in a crater while Brando tracked me down. He learned to trot away from me as long as I pointed with my arm held out. When I dropped my arm, Brando stopped, turned, and sat facing me until I put my hand on my chest, whereupon he ran to me and sat at my feet, facing me. Of course, he also trained for the usual tasks, like walking very close beside me without a leash. When I stopped, he sat in place for as long as I stood there. Brando was magnificent, and we loved every minute of it, despite Brando's failure to complete the certification because of his fear of gunfire and a diagnosed blood anemia. I traveled a good bit that year, too, but let's do the next chapter on that. It's too much to include in this one. Also coincidental that summer was the expansion of the University of Maryland Overseas Extension to a full-time junior college program in Munich. The Maryland Overseas Extension had been established because the services were pushing officers without degrees to get one. Maryland conducted accelerated 6-week classes in non-lab arts and science courses at U.S. bases from England to Africa. Maryland was able to attract outstanding professors because they could transfer from one base to another as often as every 6 weeks, expenses paid, living in bachelor officers' quarters, dining in the officers' club, and with PX and commissary privileges. It was an outstanding opportunity for them to see Europe and get paid for it. The Munich program was expanded to a day program to accommodate dependents who had graduated high school and were remaining in Germany until their fathers were transferred back to the U.S. Although the Korean War was hot and heavy, dependent boys living outside the U.S. were not required to register for the draft. Besides, like the faculty, out-of-town students were also dormitoried at the BOQ, and then, of course, Aurelie was still at home during her senior year at Munich High. So, there were lots of good reasons for attending UM Munich. It wouldn't be a financial burden to my parents either, since I paid my tuition with the savings from my 5 years of working Georgia jobs. My escape was back on track better than I ever dreamed. 55 of us enrolled in that first class. Many had been out of high school more than a year, and there were nearly the same number of men and women in the BOQ building we had to ourselves. The women had the entire second floor, and we had the third floor, 2 to a room, without supervision of any kind. For the most part, the women dated officers, and the men dated German girls. Kenny, a pretty good trumpet player, got a running start at becoming an alcoholic. One evening, we carried him to his desk before class and put a pencil in his hand as he stared unblinking off into space. Another classmate celebrated his birthday with 19 shots of cognac. We were not sure he was still living when we deposited him on his bathroom floor next to the John. Things started to get out of hand when one of the men's rooms was furnished with wall-to-wall mattresses for group gropes with Fräuleins. One night, my roommate Dick woke me up with a nude girl standing next to him, and he asked if I would care to have her, which I politely declined, recalling Father's razor. One of our dorm mates was a 14-year-old black boy from Texas named Ulysses. His father was an education director with the HICOG government. Ulysses had been educated at home and had never attended public schools. His immaturity, education, and cultural background had not in any way prepared him for us. He was so ignorant and superstitious that we called him useless. When someone got a rubber Frankenstein mask, an idea was born. One night we told Useless that a criminally insane and armed inmate had escaped and was last seen somewhere on base. I guess we overdid it, because Useless wouldn't go to sleep. He came into the study room every few minutes in his pajamas with a steel pipe, scared to death. When it looked like he was going to stay up all night, we all gave up and went to bed. Later, someone came to wake me up. Useless had finally gone to sleep. So I got into costume with the mask, trench coat, scarf, and gloves. We fired a blank pistol in the hallway, and there was lots of shouting as I stomped toward Useless's room. Because he had the pipe and we needed some light, another guy ran into the room ahead of me with a flashlight. I threw open Useless's door, and the flashlight provided perfect illumination for my mask. Useless froze with eyes wider open than I ever imagined possible. Then he jumped under his blanket and covered himself up, screaming at the top of his lungs. There were no repercussions from his father, except that soon after Ulysses left school. There was one other mask event, though. One night I wore it down the middle of a dimly lit street off base with a few of my buddies out of sight. As I approached a streetlight, a German on a bicycle came toward me. When he was close enough to see the mask, he did something I never saw another German bike rider do. With an expression of total horror, he stood up on the pedals and sped quickly down the street. Fortunately, sanity soon overcame the frivolity, and life settled into a reasonable academic atmosphere. Dick and I even built a couple of model airplanes. His was an original free-flight model designed to resemble a hawk. It successfully flew out of sight on its first flight because we put too much fuel in it. The faculty and the courses were a great intellectual awakening for me. For lack of anything better, I was a history major. Many of the faculty stayed on at Munich rather than moving to other bases, so we were pretty much a big happy family. Several of them regularly dined with us and even weekended with us at the Garmisch ski resort atop a 2.5-hour tunneled cog rail ride inside the mountain to the top of the Zugspitze, which had a hotel with the highest bar in Europe. It was operated for the Army, so rooms were $1 a night, ski equipment was 75 cents a day, and drinks were a quarter. At that altitude, far above the tree line, 4,000 feet straight down to the valley on the east side, it didn't take many drinks to do the job. Aurelie and I shared a room on these superb weekends, and it was great to spend all night alone without her family nearby. Needless to say, there were times when our self-imposed celibacy nearly went by the board. The Zugspitze was a great place to learn to ski. The southwestern side was a shallow slope without rocks or trees. There was no lift, so we had to climb up to the edge of the cliff, point our skis down the slope, and just go straight, fast as hell, until we fell. Because of the altitude, we could still ski in May in shirt sleeves. By then, there was a thick crust of snow on the surface, which skis could not penetrate, so we really went fast as hell then. Problem was, if you fell on an elbow with your sleeves rolled up, the crust would badly scratch up an arm. One memory that stands out was the time the psychology professor and I braved a blizzard that was blowing so hard we had to crawl up to the top. Blowing snow so limited visibility that we came within a foot of crawling off that 4,000-foot cliff. Hot-butted rums at the bar tasted especially good after that adventure. In February 1951, I went to Frankfurt to take the physical exam for the Navy ROTC scholarship, which amounted to tuition, books, fees, uniforms, and $100 a month to any of the 55 best universities in the U.S. and a regular commission on graduation. I was so nervous about the eye exam that my armpits dripped sweat like a leaky faucet, even though I was sitting on a table in my underwear with the windows wide open. I flunked the exam because my blood pressure was over 200. I was convinced that my high blood pressure was due to a sympathetic nervous reaction, so I checked into Munich Army Hospital for a heart check, where they documented my heart condition every hour for 3 days. Thankfully, it was normal. The following year, I returned for another try. My pressure was still above normal, but I had a formal statement from an Army doctor to Navy summarizing my hospital checks. When I appeared before a review board, I was asked why I wanted to join the Navy. I said that I wanted to fly. I was asked why I didn't join the Air Force. I couldn't very well say that it was because Air Force did not offer a scholarship, so I said that I also wanted to go to sea. I was selected as an alternate, so I had little hope of continuing college when we returned to the U.S. My backup plan was to apply for the Naval Aviation Cadet, NAVCAD program, which required only 2 years of college, but with my blood pressure problem, I could no longer count on ever getting a pilot's license, much less a Navy scholarship. I did not have the slightest idea of a backup career plan or ambition. My future looked bleak indeed. Aurelie's mother, Helen, must have believed I was no longer a viable prospect and told my parents that I was seeing too much of Aurelie. After all, I was only the son of an uneducated immigrant enlisted man and his wife. My parents, bless their hearts, blew Helen off by telling her she should settle the matter with her daughter. They would not tell me who to see. This was the first indication I had of Helen's disapproval, though there were two related mysteries I did not understand until years later. Since Clayton was with the State Department, they had 30-day annual vacations in the U.S. for which they rated transatlantic passages aboard luxury liners like SS United States. Orally returned from her 1950 summer, devastated. She cried a lot, but refused to say what had happened, except that she had a very bad encounter with her father, Mackie, when she visited him in New York. Whatever had happened, the effects did not go away. I knew it was serious,